On today's show, I will be ranking the top outfields in the National League East and then putting it together with our infield rankings to tell you which team has the best lineup in this division.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on X at Finkelstein Ryan. You can also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. Well, on yesterday's show, I broke down the top infield in the National League East as part of our big series of shows that I'm having here leading up to opening day, where I am putting the Mets up against the Braves and the Phillies to figure out which team on paper is the best in this division heading into the 2025 season. So, infield breakdown, for those of you who missed that show, the way I am going about this grading process is I'm awarding stars out of 5 to each player in a team's starting lineup. So a 5-star player is a superstar, a 4-star player, an all-star, 3-star, above average regular, 2-star, replacement level player, 1-star, anything worse than that. And we are doing half stars. There's a player cut in between an above average regular, but not quite an all-star. Somewhere in there, you get 3.5 stars. And that just leads me right into the rankings here. We're going to start off in left field, and we'll open it up with Brandon Nimmo, who I do have at 3.5 stars. Now, Brandon Nimmo has never been an all-star. You look at what he did last year. It was a down year across the board when you look at his slash line. Pretty much career lows in batting average, on base, and slug. I believe his slug was worse as a rookie. I think that's about it. I think this was the lowest batting average and on base percentage he ever had. With that said, he still hit 23 home runs, one below his career high that he set in 2023 with 24. And he set a career high by a long shot with 90 runs driven in. He was 15 for 15 in stolen bases. He had a 109 WRC plus. I'm going to mention that stat a lot throughout the show today. WRC plus is weighted runs created plus, a stat that measures hitters on a league average of 100. So it really does tell us how these hitters compare to one another. So for Brandon Nimmo, a 109 WRC plus is better than league average, but pretty low for his career because the 3 years prior to that, Brandon Nimmo was a 130 or more WRC plus player every single season. Across that 3-year span, he accumulated 12.6 WAR, averaged out to about 4.2 wins per season. Last year, his WAR was 2.7. So last year was a down year for Brandon Nimmo. He did play through some injuries, and once again, injuries have popped up. I do think if Brandon Nimmo was completely healthy and playing at his absolute apex, he could be an all-star. He could be a 4-star player. But I also think that there's a world where the injuries show up again, or he's just maybe on a little bit of a steadier decline. We don't know. So I think putting him right between a 3 and a 4-star made a lot of sense. So I got him at 3.5. Move over to Jurickson Profar, the second best left fielder in this division. And again, we're only talking about the Mets, the Braves, and the Phillies. Because if I had James Wood in this mix, I don't know what I would give him. I might give him 4 stars. I mean, that's banking a lot on potential. But I think James Wood has all-star potential. It probably would have been a little bit below that and probably would have been 3.5. But James Wood, sky's the limit for what he can be. But the Nationals this year, to fit all these episodes in where they're not 45 minutes an episode, we're tabling the Nationals and the Marlins and just looking at the teams at the top of the division. So that brings me to the second best left fielder of these 3 teams, and it's Jurickson Profar. Last year, he was probably a 4-star player. I believe he was an all-star. He hit 280, 380 on base, 459 slug, 24 homers, 85 RBIs, a 139 WRC plus. He was a 4-win player. He was great. But the year prior in 2023, he was worth minus 1.6 FWAR. Now, I don't think that he's going to be that bad. I look at what he did in 2022 when he was a 2.5 win player, basically 2.4 FWAR. I think that's sort of the floor. Last year was the ceiling. He probably meets somewhere in the middle. I don't know if he's going to be quite as good as last year, although I wouldn't rule it out. He made some pretty clear swing changes that resulted in what he was able to do. At the same time, let's see him do it outside of San Diego. He's definitely an above average regular, though, going into this season. So we can't give him a rating anything lower than 3 stars. Moving on to the Phillies, you got Max Kepler, who is slated to be their left fielder most of the time. There's going to be some times where they slide Martian to left maybe and have Rojas play center. But basically, I think this sort of was an opportunity for Kepler to get a lot of playing time. And in 2023, this was a guy that was an impact player. He hit 24 home runs, had a 123 WRC plus with the Twins. That was in 130 games, 2.8 win player. Problem, he's banged up a lot, and he was again last year when he only played 105 games, hit 8 home runs, 42 RBIs, 94 WRC plus. He was only worth 1 win above replacement, exactly 1 flat. So I look at Max Kepler. Is he an above average regular, or is he more of a replacement level player that could go either way, where he could pop off and have a really nice season, or he could really struggle and not stay on the field? So I don't think it's fair to give him anything more than 2 stars. So that moves us to center field. Michael Harris II is clearly the top center fielder in this division. I was tempted to give him 4 stars. I really was, because I'm a huge believer in Michael Harris. And if he's the guy that he was as a rookie, he's a 4-star player at least. I mean, he that year was nearly a 5-win player, 4.8 WAR, 19 home runs, 20 stolen bases, 137 WRC plus. That WRC plus has dropped year over year from 137 to 115. Then last year it was at 99. His WAR has dropped off with it, 4.8 to 3.8 to 2.0. But he was hurt last year. I trust him to be a great defensive center fielder. There's no doubt about it. He's flirting with 2020 every year. I think if he's healthy, he'll get there at some point. And he could easily hit 300. He's hit 290 a couple times. I could see him hitting 300. So I have to give him 3.5 stars. To me, going into this season, if you had to ask me, to put completely honest, if you had to ask me and take the fan element out of it and the biases, you have to say, which guy would I rather have this season in the Mets outfield? Michael Harris II or Brandon Nimmo? I'm taking Harris. I am, because he's younger. He plays the more premium position, and I think he has just as much offensive upside. I think Nimmo has a higher floor offensively, I would say. But regardless, I think 3.5 is a pretty fair rating for Michael Harris II. Moves us over to the Phillies. Brandon Marsh, I had him at 2.5 stars. In 2023, he hit 277, 372 on base, 458 slug. So 125 WRC plus in a 3.5 win season. That was outstanding. Last year, dropped off to a 249 average, 328 on base, 419 slug, 108 WRC plus, 2.4 WAR. Still going to be a good player, a much better defender in left than center, but it seems like the Phillies are going to roll with Marsh in center, Kepler in left, and then Castellanos in right with Johan Rojas coming off the bench. We'll talk about Rojas in the next segment as we get into depth for these outfields. But to me, Brandon Marsh, better than a replacement level starter, but not quite a fully above average guy. So we'll put him at 2.5. Brings us to the Mets center field situation. Jose Siri. He's got the floor of a great defender, ceiling of 25 home runs, which he hit in 2023. Might steal 15 bases on his best year. He's stolen 14 twice. 2.6 was his WAR in 2023. Last year, that dropped down to, I believe it was 1.8. I did not mark that on my notes, but I know it was below 2. And that's just because of the glove. The glove raises up his floor to a pretty high standard, but there's a lot of variance in what the Mets might get out of his bat. So Jose Siri checks in at 2 stars out of 5. And that brings us to our final position, right field. And I don't think I need to spend too much time on this position, because to me, the ratings are very clear cut. Juan Soto, 5-star. He's a superstar. Ronald Acuña Jr. would be 5 stars if he was completely healthy. He's going to start the season likely at the beginning of May. And we'll see what he looks like coming off his second ACL tear. I had to ding him a little bit, so I put him at 4.5. But I feel like Acuña's impact and Acuña's name value alone was enough to just say, you know what? It's disrespectful to have him as a 4-star player when he's better than the other 4 stars that we've talked about when he's right. He could be the best player in this division when he's right. So I think this is a guy that get right back to being a 5-star player next year, but he gets knocked a little tiny bit for the injury. Nick Castellanos is replacement level for me. Now, he'll have stretches where he gets hot. And last year, it was still 23 home runs and 86 RBIs. He's one of those guys where the WAR might deceive you because he has a very big impact in that clubhouse as a leader. and a guy that is going to give you good at-bats, particularly against left-handed pitching. But last year, it was a 105 WRC plus, just better than league average, and 0.4 WAR. So I can't give him more than 2 stars because he's brutal defensively in right field. And he's probably at the point of his career where he can extend things by being a lefty masher. And then his numbers are going to look better. I mean, if you put Nick Castellanos in the Randall Grichuk role, do you think he might outperform what Grichuk did last year? I think there's a solid chance, but he's got to play every day, and righties can sometimes take his lunch money. So overall, I think that a 2 is a fair rating for a guy that is a very streaky hitter, and that's really where his value is on those times where he actually gets hot. But we're going to do in the next segment. I'm going to talk about depth, how that plays into the equation. We're going to give a little bit of a rating there. Then I will give you a complete outfield score and tell you how that relates to the way these teams will stack up with their lineups in 2025. We're going to get to all that in just a minute. First, though, quick word from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by Wonderful Pistachios. If you're looking for a snack that's both delicious and nutritious, crack into a good source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. Plus, they're packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats that help you feel fuller longer. I think the best endorsement I can give you on Wonderful Pistachios is the bag I'm holding up. Listen to how many are left in this bag. Not a lot, okay? I got to go out and get more because this is my favorite snack. I love the no-shell varieties. This is one of my favorite flavors. The honey roasted smoky barbecue is another one of my favorite flavors as well. And if you like the in-shell varieties, because you like to crack open every nut for that satisfying crunch, you can find that over with Wonderful Pistachio as well. They have the in-shell varieties too. Get snacking and cracking with the snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. If you're an everyday listener to the show, make sure to become a Locked On Mets insider. This is our texting service where you get updates from me anytime news breaks in the match. You can ask me questions anytime. You can also take part in our Locked On Mets sign photo giveaways. If you want to be a Locked On Mets insider, find a link in the episode description. Go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. So let's talk about depth, because that does play into a team's outfield, particularly the fourth outfielder. Who's the guy that's going to be a starter if somebody goes down? With the Phillies, their fourth outfielder is Johan Rojas. Now, Johan Rojas had a fantastic rookie season where he hit over 300 and showed he could be a great defender. But by the time you got into the playoffs, you realized, oh, this guy's not that great of a bat. You know, he was a guy that teams were probably comfortable pitching to. And once there was a scouting report out, it looked pretty rocky. So he went from a 1.5 win season in a limited sample size to a 1.2 win season in a more full sample size. He did steal 25 bags last year, which was his one redeeming factor on offense, but he had a 601 OPS. He was not good. So I look at Johan Rojas and I say, okay, how much better is he than a replacement level player? But then I look at Tyrone Taylor. Tyrone Taylor is a great fourth outfielder. He's particularly good in the corners. He's not as good in center field as Rojas is, but I'd probably guess he's a little bit better in right and left just because of how much he's played in all 3 spots. That versatility is great for a fourth outfielder. Last year, he did have a 701 OPS, a 98 WRC plus, but his WAR was identical to Rojas at 1.2, just because he wasn't as strong defensively. So I look at Taylor, compare him to Rojas. Do I think the Mets have a huge edge? No, I would take Taylor over Rojas because I like the floor more. But if you're a Phillies fan, you're saying, are you crazy? Johan Rojas is better. Just like if you're a Braves fan, you're still probably buying into Jared Kelenic. Kelenic, as we all remember, was once a top prospect for the Mets, got traded for Edwin Diaz and Robinson Cano. He hasn't figured it out yet. He is one of the proof, or one of the examples I think you could put up there to say, don't hug prospects because sometimes they don't pan out. Now, people would have said the same thing a year ago on Pete Crow Armstrong, and I think he's ready to pop off and absolutely pan out, but that's just sort of the game when it comes to trading prospects. Now, as far as what he was last year, Kelenic was a half a win player, 679 OPS, but he's still only 25 years old and has got a higher ceiling than anybody that we're talking about in this depth piece of the conversation. So, yeah, I can see if you're a Braves fan talking yourself into that. Brian De La Cruz gives them a right-handed bat to platoon. Is he great? No, but can he hit some home runs? Yes. So yesterday, when I ranked the infielders, and if you missed that, I do encourage you to check out that show, I did award a depth point. I didn't want to grade all those infielders specifically that are coming off the bench and have their grade weight as heavily as a starting player. So I said whoever has the most, or the best depth gets a point. I thought the Mets clearly have more depth with all the guys they can throw in the infield between Jet Williams as the farthest end guy, the guy that's furthest away, to Ronnie Mauricio, to Luis Acuña and Brett Beatty. I just look at all those options, compare it to what the other teams have, and say, you know what? The Mets had the best depth. I gave them an extra star. When it comes to the outfield depth, I don't think there is a differentiating factor. If there was one, it would be the fact that the Mets have Jesse Winker and Starling Marte that they can plug into left or right if somebody gets hurt. They do have more depth in that regard. But if those guys are no longer in the DH spot and they're playing in the outfield, well, for one, they're not great defensively. Two, your DH spot takes a hit. So ultimately, I decided that for depth, we're keeping all three teams even. Nobody gets an extra point. So now let's count out the outfield points. So the Mets, you have 5 from Juan Soto, 3.5 for Nimmo, 2 for Jose Siri. That's 10.5 stars out of 15. The Braves, you got Ronald Acuña Jr., 4.5, Michael Harris II, 3.5, Jurickson Profar, 3. Put that all together, you get 11 out of 15. So half of a star better than the Mets. And then we look at the Phillies, Max Kepler at 2, Nick Castellanos at 2, Brandon Marsh at 2.5. That's a weak outfield, a really weak outfield. I don't even care about Johan Rojas' defense and center as your fourth outfielder. That's rocky. So they get 6.5 out of 15 possible points. So then when we combine yesterday's infield rankings with today's outfield rankings, the New York Mets lead this division with 25 stars out of 35 possible. The Braves, 23.5. The Phillies, 20.5. So as we look at how these three teams stack up in the infield and the outfield alone, the Mets would have a slight edge. Where they don't necessarily have that edge is at DH. What I want to talk about to close the show is DH and catcher, 2 positions we have yet to broach. Are those positions that will put the Braves closer to the Mets or get the Phillies back into this conversation? We'll talk about that in just a minute. First, though, quick word from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in. It's your personal CFO giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money, it's not just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center where you can track all of your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So you stop just managing your money and you start building wealth. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, even plan long-term. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONMLB at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONMLB for half off your first year. If you're watching the show today on YouTube, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. Our next goal is to get to 13,000 subscribers by opening day. We're inching closer and closer, but we're running out of time. So I appreciate all of you who continue to subscribe. Let's talk about the catching position. I did not put that in the infield show, if I'm being completely honest. I was going to include that as part of what I was going over yesterday. But I really got into the weeds on the infield, so I ended up forgetting catcher. Not that I ever was going to include it as part of the infield. It was just going to be a little extra subset where these teams could have added more points. But honestly, the conclusion I came to when I was doing my research on this is I don't think any of these teams has an edge at catcher because they all have massive question marks. We'll start with the Mets. Francisco Alvarez out to start the year. He is a top 10 catcher in baseball, great defender. Hit 25 home runs as a rookie, improved in some other areas last year, hitting for a higher average, getting on base at a better clip, but still not a great offensive player. The power wasn't there. Can he put it all together and be a superstar? We hope so. Can he put it all together and be an all-star, at least a league average bat with the great defense? All of those things we hope continue to evolve for Alvarez and he can get there. But for now, it's hard to say that he's better than a guy in JT Realmuto that's as established as any catcher in baseball. Granted, he's running out of prime if he's not already out of prime. He's on the other side of his career. So I can't look at JT Realmuto, who was a 6.7 win player in 2022. Now he's a 2-win player the last couple of years and say, oh yeah, he's by far the best catcher in this division. And last year he went from 21 stolen bases a couple of years ago to only 2. So the legs clearly aren't where they used to be. I know he had some knee issues last year, but that's what happens when you're 34 years old, and he just turned 34 on March 18th. So to me, I can't put Realmuto over Alvarez, but I can't put Alvarez over Realmuto. And then I look at the Braves and I say, all right, Sean Murphy, you're inconsistent. You've been injury prone. Are you really the best catcher in this division? I don't know. Drake Baldwin is going to start the season likely as their catcher because Murphy has some cracked ribs getting hit by a pitch in spring training. Is Drake Baldwin going to all of a sudden his rookie season take off? He could. He is one of the top prospects in baseball. I'm not going to give him bonus stars over these other guys. So to make it even, I'm just going to put them right down the center, all 3 of them. 2.5. They're all 2.5 star players to me. Better than your replacement level player, but not necessarily an above average regular, somewhere in between. That brings me to DH, where there is a clear differentiating factor between these 3 teams because the Mets just do not have the same type of DH as the Braves and the Phillies. The Braves have Marcell Ozuna coming off a season where he was a 5-star bat for most of the year. He was in the Triple Crown conversation in September until Ohtani just completely took over. That's how good Ozuna was. He hit 39 homers, drove in 104. The year prior to that, he was 40 and 100. He is as good of a right-handed bat as we have in the game at the DH position. Obviously, there's all the off-the-field stuff that it's hard to ignore and sort of celebrate Ozuna. But when it comes to production, the guy is great. Meanwhile, Kyle Schwarber, also extremely productive. The last 3 years, it's 46 home runs, 47 home runs, then 38 home runs, 100 RBIs, 108, 110. He's just a consistent run producer. They're moving him down in the lineup, so he's not going to be batting leadoff like he has the last couple of years. That could lead to some more run production. He is in a contract year. I think Schwarber probably has another really solid season. And with that, I look at Ozuna and Schwarber, and they're sort of neck and neck. I can't necessarily say Ozuna is definitely better because they're coming off the better year. Schwarber's younger. So I think they're right in the same boat, and I'm not going to give them a 4-star rating even if their bat warrants it because they're DHs. And I can't say that Marcell Ozuna is going to have the same impact on the Braves this year as Austin Riley that's doing it at third base and in the batter's box. It's just a different thing. You have to weigh them down a little bit. So with that, I'm putting both Ozuna and Schwarber at 3.5 stars, which leads me to the Mets situation. And while I like the platoon of Jesse Winker and Starling Marte, how much better than average is it going to be? It's going to be good, but can I actually say it's right there with Schwarber and Olsen, Schwarber and Ozuna, guys that are going to hit 40 home runs and drive in 100? Where the Mets, if they're lucky, they're 2 DHs together, Jesse Winker and Starling Marte, combined for 15 to 20 home runs. Like that's the best outcome. I'm sorry, they can't be anywhere close to the other 2 guys that I put at 3.5 stars. So the Mets DH platoon gets a star rating of 2 out of 5. With that said, when we add the 2 stars for the DH, 2.5 stars for the catcher, plus what the Mets did with my infield rankings and outfield rankings, you put all of it together, I have the Mets at 20.5 stars. It's really solid. That's out of a potential 9 times 5 out of 45. So it's pretty good. The Braves also end up at an identical 29.5, and the Phillies bring up the rear at 26.5. To me, going through all these ratings and everything else, I think it's pretty obvious that the Mets have, right with the Braves, the best lineup in this division. And I think the Phillies are the 3rd team. I really believe that to be the case. Now, this is just on the position player front. When we get to pitching, the Phillies are going to have something to say. And if they really have an overwhelming pitching staff, that's their path to being the team that wins this division again. It has to be predicated on their ability to pitch at a level that the Mets and the Braves maybe can't. But at this stage right now, I look at the lineup, and I think the Phillies are at a real disadvantage. You look, and we go through the names here, right? Phillies have Trey Turner, Bryce Harper, Alec Boehm batting 3rd, Kyle Schwarber, Nick Castellanos, Max Kepler, JT Realmuto, and Bryson Stott. and then Brandon Marsh hitting ninth. Looking at that lineup, how many guys are clearly above average bats? To me, I count 3. Turner, Harper, Schwarber. Bohm and Castellanos could be good, but they also could not. Max Kepler, very inconsistent. Bryson Stott, inconsistent with the bat. J.T. Realmuto, what are you getting? Brandon Marsh is a guy that can be great, but also might not be. So to me, that is largely different from what the Mets and the Braves have. We look at the Mets lineup, and there's a lot less holes. Lindor to Soto to Alonso to Nimmo to Vientos as your 1 through 5. That is as good as any team in baseball. Jesse Winker and Starling Marte in that DH platoon. Jose Siri gives you the ability to get into some power, but he's really there for the defense and center. To start the season, Brett Beatty and Acuña platooning at second base, but eventually Jeff McNeil slides in there. Luis Torrens starts the season at catcher, but again, at some point, maybe something gives, and Alvarez will be healthier. Not maybe. Something will give at some point. Alvarez will come back, and that'll make the lineup that much better. Meanwhile, the Braves, you're looking at Jurickson Profar, Austin Riley, Matt Olson, Marcell Ozuna, Michael Harris II, Ozzie Albies. For now, Drake Baldwin, at some point, Sean Murphy, Orlando Arcia, and Jared Kelenic. That's not even counting Acuña, who would then slide to the top of the lineup and knock everybody else down a peg. If I had to award based on 2 teams that ended up identical through my grading system, who is better? It's hard to pick against the Braves. It really is, because the Braves, that lineup is so deep. When you're talking about Ozzie Albies, once you get Acuña back, if you slide everybody down a peg, you'll have Albies, Sean Murphy, or Drake Baldwin, and then Orlando Arcia as your bottom 3. That's really not bad. I think the Mets top 5. I don't know. If we're talking Acuña, Profar, Riley, Olson, Ozuna, compare that to Soto, Lindor, Alonso, Nimmo, Vientos. I'm taking the Mets slightly, but it's not significant. And ultimately, the Braves just have, I think, they have more star talent, higher volume of star players in that lineup, or just really good regulars, however you want to describe it. The Mets probably have more depth overall, but it's a complete toss-up for me trying to pick between those 2 teams and differentiate and decide which one of them has the best lineup in this division. I think it is as close as it can be between 2 teams. I really do. So we'll see how it all shakes out. Tomorrow, the final show of this preview series, I will be breaking down pitching. I'm not entirely sure how I'm going to do it. Do I break it up from starters and relievers? Can I put them all together in one show? You will find out as I get to it. You also might wonder, why am I doing this series over the weekend and ignoring the news? I have told you guys on past shows, but just for anyone who might have missed them, I am out of town this weekend for my cousin's wedding. So I do have my computer. If the Mets traded for Dylan Cease out of nowhere, I'd be able to do a show on it, but the plan is to unplug for a couple days. So I'm banking up shows here because this was a series I've been wanting to do, breaking down the top 3 teams in this division, and it felt like a natural time to do exactly that. So we will talk the pitching side of things on tomorrow's show. For now, though, that's going to be all. As always, thank you for listening. Make sure you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. If you want to be a Locked On Mets insider, find the link in the episode description. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure you hit that subscribe button. If you want to follow me on social, you can do so at Finkelstein Ryan. Follow the show at Locked On Mets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listener, your first watch every day. Now for your second watch, head over to YouTube and check out the first ever 24/7 streaming channel that covers everything in the world of sports. I'm talking about Locked On Sports Today with our local hosts from each team, league-wide hosts from each league. Find Locked On Sports Today streaming 24/7 on YouTube.